Chers auditeurs,
Dear listeners,
bonjour.
welcome to Comme d'Archi Podcast Season 6.
Saison 6, dans le monde fascinant des architectes.
And in the architectural projects.
Je suis Anne-Charlotte Deponte, passionnée d'architecture et docteur des universités en histoire de l'archi.
I am one of the spokespersons of Anne-Charlotte, who is a PhD in architecture history.
Merci.
Thank you
D'être avec moi aujourd'hui.
to be with us today.
Et
And
maintenant,
now,
lundi en français, place au talent.
and Wednesday, let's talk projects. In English, of course.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Dear listeners, hello and welcome to our summer series of Comme d'Archi Season 6. This is Esther on behalf of Anne-Charlotte. Let's continue the story of the Château de Maintenon with the chapter on Françoise d'Aubigné. But who is she? Her grandfather was Théodore Agrippa, born in 1552 into a bourgeois family named d'Aubigné or Aubigny. He was a military leader in the service of Henri de Navarre, an uncompromising Calvinist with a temperament described as hot-headed and belligerent. A Baroque poet who wrote numerous anti-Catholic pamphlets and polemical attacks against converted Protestants. He adopted the surname Aubigné, linking him to a noble family to facilitate his marriage in 1583 to Suzanne de Lusignan de Lezay, a wealthy heiress of high nobility. She gave him a son, Constant, the father of Françoise, and two daughters, Louise de Villette and Marie de Commendade. Constant led a life of debauchery, intrigue, and embezzlement. He killed his first wife because she was cheating on him. He converted to Catholicism in 1618 during a trip to Paris to enter the service of the court. As a result, his father disinherited him in favor of his sisters, whose husbands had remained faithful to the Reformed religion. At the end of September 1627, following a plot after a trip to England, Constant was placed under house arrest at the Château de Trompette in Bordeaux. Within 3 months, he seduced and married Jeanne de Cardillac, the daughter of his jailer. He was released on February 19 of the following year. After his release in 1628, Constant became involved in the rebellion of Gaston d'Orléans, brother of Louis XIII, against Richelieu in 1632. Arrested in Saintes, he was imprisoned in the Fort de la Prée. Transferred to prisons in Poitiers and then Niort in 1635, he was not released until 1643, after the cardinal's death. Françoise was born in the conciergerie of the Niort prison at the end of November 1635, and was baptized in the church of Notre-Dame de Niort on November 28, 1635. Her godmother, Suzanne de Beaudéant, aged 8, was the daughter of the governor of Niort and Madame de Maintenon, a devout Catholic. During Constant's 8 years in prison in Niort, Françoise and her brothers were entrusted to their aunt Louise de Villette, who had inherited the Château de Mercy near Niort. They received a Huguenot education. Then, upon Constant's death in 1647, Jeanne, the wife, and Françoise's mother, was destitute and reduced to begging with her children for several months in La Rochelle. She then entrusted her children to her sister-in-law. But, outraged by Françoise's Huguenot education at Marseille, Madame de Maintenon, her godmother's mother, and widow of the governor of Nôtre, obtained custody of her. Françoise then had a very hard life because this lady was very stingy. After an unsuccessful placement at the Ursuline convent in Niort, Madame de Maintenon took her back into her home. It was during these years that she met Scarron twice and chose marriage rather than the prospect of languishing in a convent. She was 16 years old. He was 42. During their marriage, Françoise learned the art of pleasing, and Scarron imparted a great deal of culture to her. When Scarron died, she kept his connections, but he left her nothing but debts. From her turbulent youth, she developed a knack for navigating life on her own and a caring nature towards children. With her reputation as a model educator of the Montchevreuil couple's children, and above all, of the daughter of Bonne de Dicourt, a mutual friend of Françoise and Montespan, she was entrusted with the secret task of taking in, hiding, and educating the children of the king and Athénaïs. For nearly 4 years, she led a semi-hidden life until January 1674, when, following the legitimization of the children, she moved with them into Montespan's apartments in the old castle of Saint-Germain. In the summer of 1674, relations with the children's mother began to deteriorate due to disagreements over their education and care, maternal jealousy, etc. Françoise considered leaving the court at the end of 1674 and requested a kind of severance payment. She was offered 100,000 livres. She considered this gratuity to be insufficient, so it was doubled in September and then supplemented by 2 further payments of 50,000 livres. Françoise then saw an opportunity to fulfill her dream, buying an estate that will provide her with a decent income and a pleasant home where she could settle down permanently. On October 16, 1674, Françoise wrote to her brother Charles, "Farewell, my dear brother. I believe we will have a rather pleasant old age." The same month, Janviette, her attorney for Scarron's estate, was tasked with finding an estate. He suggested Maintenon, which seemed to suit her finances and tastes. The purchase was completed on December 27, 1674, for 240,000 livres, which, with expenses, mortgage interest, etc., cost her 260,000 livres. It should be noted that Françoise did not visit it until February 1675. She said of the house she fell in love with, "It is a large castle at the end of a large village, a location to my taste, with meadows all around and a river running through the moats." She had a new wing built and commissioned Le Nôtre to design the canal, the flower beds, and the park at the end of which ran the aqueduct that supposed carried water from the Eure to Versailles. It should be noted that the widow Scarron, now Marquise, ordered the junction between the 15th century castle and the square tower to be built to house her own apartments. Known to be sensitive to the cold, she is said to have chosen this location to benefit from more sunlight and more modest interior spaces that were easier to heat. On January 8, 1680, her position at court was made official, when she was named second lady-in-waiting to the new Dauphine. She was relieved of her duties with the children, but had to follow the royal caravan. With official accommodation in the royal palaces, Maintenon was no longer her sole focus. She set about making it habitable for the court. She behaved like a good chatelaine. In 1682, she set up a cloth factory by bringing in Normans and Flemings from the Courtrai region who were specialists in damask cloth, and a laundry, presumably located in the buildings in the forecourt, thus creating full employment for the inhabitants of the surrounding area. She was concerned about the poor, saying to her brother, "We must help them, provided they work." The historian Jean-Marie Pérouse de Monclos recounts on the Pont Aqueduct bridge over the canal that it is, and I quote, "One of the elements of the 110-kilometer diversion canal from the began in 1684 to supply water to the gardens of Versailles. Construction was interrupted in 1688 by the war. The levelling was carried out by the engineer Lahire and the construction by Vauban, who was in charge of 30,000 men, whose working conditions appear to have been disastrous. To cross the Maintenon Valley, a siphon would have sufficed, but an aqueduct reminiscent of the great works of the Romans, and in particular the Pont du Gard that Louis XIV had seen, was preferred. Like the Pont du Gard, the Maintenon aqueduct was to have 3 levels of arches." End of quote. Indeed, the War of the League of Augsburg initially slowed down the work, but the coffers were empty, and work ceased definitively in 1694. There were still 29 kilometers and some ancillary work to be done before the waters of the Eure could reach the cascades of Versailles. Louis XIV, to compensate for the damage to the park, donated the unfinished aqueduct to Madame de Maintenon and gave her the title of Marquise. After 1688, the Marquise de Maintenon no longer stayed at the château. In 1698, having no descendants, she bequeathed the estate to her niece, Françoise d'Aubigné, as a dowry for her marriage to Marshal Adrien Maurice de Noailles. The Marquise raised this child as her own. She made her heiress. The château and the lands constituted a generous dowry to enable her to marry the Maréchal de Noailles, one of the best matches at court. In 1715, upon the death of the king, Madame de Maintenon retired to the Maison Royale de Saint-Louis, now Saint-Cyr l'École, 78, a boarding school for noble and poor girls that she had created. She died there in 1719, as Françoise Chandernagor so beautifully recounts in L'Allée du Roi, the King's Alley. The Noailles family then passed Maintenon on to the Noailles family. Around 1855, the facades of the main building were transformed, along with some of the rooms and galleries, to bring them into line with the tastes of the time. The park became a landscaped garden with the ruins of the aqueduct as a backdrop. It would be good if new archaeological analysis could confirm the dating of the entire building, even though we know that Madame de Maintenon's château had a square layout with a central building reserved for living quarters and 2 wings at the rear. A curtain wall demolished in the 17th century to open up the view of the flower beds closed off the 4th side. In front of the castle lay the lower courtyard with its outbuildings. To the west of the Eure were large communal buildings with dovecotes and gardens. A bygone era, a bygone way of life. Was it wrong to want to acquire comfort, knowing that bourgeois comfort led to comfort for all in the 20th century? Paul de Noailles is restoring and adding a great deal. First of all, he reintroduced Renaissance and Neo-Gothic influences, which can be seen on the north facade. Need we remind you that medieval architecture was back in vogue at that time, combining gargoyles, Gothic lintels, and Renaissance balconies during the eclectic 19th century. A cistern was installed in the attic to supply running water. Radiators were installed in the main rooms and fireplaces in the outbuildings. Paul de Noailles redesigned the layout, transforming part of the apartments into a series of staterooms, the Grand Salon, the billiard room, and the library. Then there was the Grande Galerie, dedicated to the Noailles-Mortemer family, a family album of portraits dating back to the Crusades. War. In the 20th century, repeated bombing rendered the castle uninhabitable. Roofs and windows were blown out. Furniture was damaged, and ceilings were attacked by fungus. Electricity, heating, and water supplies were all out of order. On July 25, 1944, it was classified as a historic monument in the hope of saving it. Today, thanks to the passion of Mr. and Mrs. Rendre, this has been achieved. But, like Sisyphus, everything has to be done again and again. This is the lot of the truly courageous, while those who go to war cultivate chaos so that they can reign in turn. Except that they will not reign. All conflict leads to the unknown. History tells us this time and time again. And everyone, by default endowed with an ego devoid of conscience when they refuse knowledge, forgets that they are merely mortal. Conversely, passionate people from all walks of life achieve the impossible. For example, in 1954, the portrait gallery in Maintenon was considered by the Historic Monuments Department to be beyond repair. But it is reported that, and I quote, Mr. Rousseau, a friend of the family's cook, decided otherwise. A former painter, plasterer, and gilder, he embarked on a major restoration project at the age of 78. Since then, the decor has undergone alterations, and in 2018, the Departmental Council undertook a restoration of the painted decorations. The work took 2 years to complete. End of quote. To conclude, I would say that nothing can ever be taken for granted. It is resilience that offers the most magical moments in each of our lives. It is up to each of us to know ourselves well in order to chart our own course. And sometimes, dreams encounter the stones that make them magical. And even if, in the end, all the corpses of an era lie beneath the earth. Dear listeners, thank you for listening. Join us next week for a new summer episode of Comme d'Archi. Until then, take care. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to tune in to our previous content on Instagram at Comme d'Archi Podcast. If you like it, make sure to promote the podcast by giving it 5 stars on Apple Podcast and adding a comment, or on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And don't forget to subscribe and listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.